Did you know, for example, that 20 years ago, bribes could be deducted from the taxes? The bribes paid to foreign public officials could be deducted from the taxes? Of course, now that's not the case anymore. Did you know that 20 years ago, you could not criminally sanction a company? Well, now you can. 20 years ago, the criminal law legislation in all our countries were very diverse in the area of anti-corruption. Today, they're by and large harmonized. 20 years ago, there was no transparency, or very little transparency, of the financing of political parties. Today, the vast majority of our member states has legislation in the area of transparency of party financing. 20 years ago, there was little to no protection of whistleblowers. Today, while not perfect, the protection of whistleblowers is certainly stronger than it was 20 years ago.
In many countries, there is a question of perception. And when it's a question of the perception, that we need to see what are the real reasons why that perception is so bad. Is it the real work that is bad, or if it's perception that is created by the politics? Because in some countries that is the case. In these matters, regardless what is the result or what is the reason of the perception or the mistrust in the institution, the key point is to follow the standards.
The first challenge is that we still have too many countries that are in what we call a non-compliance procedure. In other words, not enough is being done by a number of countries to fully implement all of GRECO recommendations. And we really need a stepping up of that effort in those countries where this is needed. The second point that we are going to talk about refers to the what I would call the perverse effect of the perception indexes. In other words, it's not because a country is facing very high on the perception indices of anti-corruption that they have no corruption problem. Corruption concerns every country, and all countries should take steps to implement preventive measures to stop corruption before it arises. Then a third challenge that we are facing in our countries is, of course, corruption does have an impact on human rights protection. We see that in many areas, in the area of the independence of the judiciary, we see that in the area of freedom of expression, freedom of the media, whistleblower protection. This is an area where we are paying an important attention in our work in GRECO, and it's a challenge that all our countries are facing together.
We must never lower our guard to fight corruption. Perception of low level of corruption must not lead to complacency. No country is immune to corruption.
Where is GRECO going in the next 20 years? Well, the first thing is GRECO is going to remain faithful to its key role, that is monitoring. We will continue to monitor the compliance with and the effective implementation of the anti-corruption standards of the Council of Europe by our 49 member states. That will remain the core of our work. It is what we do best. But on top of that, we may be doing a little bit more. So far, we tend to tell countries what is wrong, but we very rarely say how to fix a problem. The next step of GRECO's work may involve an element of advice, of helping countries not only to identify the problems, but also to identify some of the solutions they can consider at a national level to address the shortcomings that have been identified in our reports.
How to effectively prevent corruption. It is important that we think globally, but act locally.
All countries, regardless of their position in perception index, are required to take concrete measures to fight and to prevent corruption. Therefore, I call all 49 member states to redouble their efforts in the fighting corruption. This is important not only because of the countries and not only because of the GRECO commitments, but for the sake of the society of all country members of the GRECO.